For your undergraduate, University of Michigan Law. I can't imagine they have many alumni who have 7 New York Times bestsellers. Now, do the administrators at Cornell and the University of Michigan bring you in to speak and mentor students who might aspire to have careers like you?
Oh yes, big write-ups in the law quadrangle notes. Once a year, I'd say. No, I think they're busily going over the curriculum and what my course curricula was to make sure this doesn't happen again. How did she get out of here like that? Cornell passed me off to University of Michigan Law. You can take care of it. We didn't solve this problem.
Unbelievable. Now, the left on campus, they think they're so brilliant. They claim victimhood. They're against hate. They're for tolerance. Yet, I noticed when you spoke at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota, the college president condemned your speech. Even though she hadn't been there, she couldn't mention one specific about it. And the students, it was a mixed view audience, gave you a standing ovation. And then, you know, at the University of Arizona, it was a few years ago, but some of those leftist boys threw a pie at you. Why
and missed.
And missed, I know.
They throw like girls.
They throw like girls. Why don't these tolerance and anti-hate campaigns sweep in these liberals who are obviously so intolerant of you, Ann?
No, that's right. And also, I mean, the idea of a college campus, what they're always bragging about while explaining why they only need to work 2 hours a week is that it would be, you know, the freedom to investigate different areas, and they don't want the freedom of speech and the freedom to engage in research, and it would be wide open, free, challenging debate. So the fact that college tuition has way outpaced inflation, and they're paid more and more and more to teach 2 hours a week and then get every other year off entirely, would be a little bit more justifiable if college campuses weren't exactly the reverse of that. Yeah. Exactly, they're the most intolerant. Absolutely. There is the least freedom to research. They are closed-minded. They are angry at any dissent from the prevailing. I mean, you have more open debate on a subway platform than on a college campus.
And the liberals seem to have a stereotype of you where they almost try to convince people not to even listen, even though you've written 7 New York Times bestsellers. But there's other intriguing parts of your life that I suspect some of our audience doesn't know about, like that you were one of John Kennedy's associates at George magazine.
Oh, yes.
An editor, you grieved over his loss. I think that might surprise some of our listeners. And I want to ask you, what other different kinds of people like that have you worked with through the years?
Well, I wouldn't want to ruin their reputations, but I do think that is a tribute to John Kennedy Jr. I mean, I really do think George magazine was a terrific magazine, and it was because he did have lots of different views, and he was interested in sponsoring debate, and he was just a magnificent man, and not a doctrinaire liberal at all.
Right.
It paid off, Jackie O, keeping her kids away from the rest of the Kennedys.
He seemed that way to some extent.
It was a great loss. It was a really great loss. I mean, that would have been one of the most fun political magazines out there now, but it couldn't survive his loss. He was George magazine.
Right. Early in your career, Ann, you came to Washington and you applied to be an intern at the National Journalism Center. And I have a little inside information about your application because I have some relations who are involved there.
Can we get back to the book? I don't know what you're going to say. I just get very uncomfortable when the subject is Ann Coulter and not ideas.
Okay, okay. A year ago, you said tongue-in-cheek, Hillary was your gal.
It was not tongue-in-cheek.
What do you think of her Secretary of State?
A lot better than William Ayers, which I considered a possibility under Obama. No, I mean, I'll say one thing that sort of surprised me since the election, that John McCain, oddly enough, seems to have actually been won over to tax cutting. Because he voted against both of Bush's tax cuts. He was a big proponent of amnesty. He wanted to shut down Gitmo. If we're going to get the Democratic Party, I'd rather have them get the blame rather than us. And it's something about Republicans. They go for the next guy in line. It's been a disaster. They will not learn. I think Michael Steele needs to punish the early primary states, or any states that allow Democrats and independents to vote in the primaries. But with John McCain as our nominee, and this was before he chose Sarah Palin, who was the one I ended up voting for, but that was for Sarah. you know, as between Hillary Clinton and John McCain, I'll take Hillary. They'd be about the same, and we wouldn't get blamed for it. And also, Republicans would notify back. I mean, that was something I think a lot of us learned during the Bush administration, like with amnesty. You want to support your president, your party is in the White House, and a lot of the spending went up, a lot of the things that hurt Republicans. And I think George Bush was a magnificent president in many ways, particularly on foreign policy and protecting this country from terror. But he was a liberal in some ways, and I mean, that's other than the fact that the country is going to be a third world country on the basis of this stimulus bill. Other than that little detail, I'm actually enjoying being in the insurgency, the angry insurgency, instead of having to be the governing majority.
The money being spent, though, it almost makes you numb, doesn't it?
Yep.
And I think people are starting to awaken to that.
Yeah, and it's only been a month.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. All of your books have been New York Times bestsellers. Deep in your heart, is there a book on maybe an esoteric topic that you'd kind of like to do, even knowing it might not be a bestseller, maybe a bio on Claire Booth Luce or something like that?
No, nothing in the nonfiction realm. I mean, there are nonfiction books I want to write, but I would not say they are esoteric topics. No, the only unusual thing I'd like to write someday is a novel. But generally, your agents wince when you say that because everybody wants to write a novel.
But you're due to do one that you like.
I think someday.
After 7 months. I've watched so many interviews of you over the years by liberals who are just overtly hostile. From, you know, Katie Couric, that Joy Behar the other day.
I liked that one.
Sitting in for Larry King. It was fun. And Charles
she's a fun gal. She's funny. She doesn't buy into the political correctness, so I like that about her.
There you go. Well, that's a plus. Is there any question from all these liberals that you wished they had asked you? Is there
There are a few that I've been surprised they haven't asked me. One person asked me, and I don't think it was a liberal, maybe it was, on a radio station, but it seems like such an obvious question on Chapter 2 that's gotten the most attention on single mothers. It seems like such an obvious question. You'd think I would get it every place. What about Barack Obama? And the answer is he was basically the equivalent of being, and I think everyone knows what's in that chapter, but just quickly, it is that single mothers are held up as the personification of selfless virtue. They are the victims, and how will this policy or that policy affect single mothers when they are the biggest victimizers of all and of their own children? And then their children victimize society when they become criminals and go on welfare and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of data in that chapter, but I've talked a lot about that. And one of the interesting things I found in researching that chapter is that adopted children turn out better than non-adopted children. So an unwed mother has, you know, 2 choices for her child: the best possible life or the worst possible life chances. Anyway, obviously some overcome it, but you're buying your child the worst lottery ticket by raising a child without a father. Barack Obama was essentially, I mean, it was the equivalent of being adopted. He was raised by his grandparents. And that does turn out fine. And he does seem to be the most well-adjusted, the least victimized. Curiously, although he had the most victim street cred of the presidential candidates, he is probably the least victimized of them. Hillary victimized by her own husband. McCain, of course, was a POW. Barack has had a charmed life, but he has the victim street cred.
Last question, quickly, Ann. What's your next project?
Top secret.
Top secret. Well, we look forward to it.
Well, I think it's going to be a while because as long as more than half of what I earn will be going to pay for people who don't work for a living, I think I'm going to stop writing for a while.
What a pleasure it's been to talk with you, to talk about your new book, Guilty: Liberal Victims and Their Assault on America. Thank you so much, Ann.
Thank you.